Okay. And I don't know what title is on my laptop.
Libby.
Oh, cool.
If we could ask everyone to mute their microphones, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Right.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Once again, it's my honor to introduce Mr. George Cuff. He has a lengthy history in the municipal sector. He's a Canada-wide reputation. He's written over 450 articles relating to municipal law and facts. He's written 11 books now. The Mayor is out on the shelves, and I just want to mention 5 of you will be given free books, signed free books again tonight, as happened last week. So this is our second in the leading from the head of the table, or leadership from the head of the table series. And Mr. Cuff has presented on both of those. And this one is about the relationship between the CAO, or the clerk treasurer, and how their relationship ripples out. So if it's vital that they find a common ground, and it's vital that they make this a positive, fulfilling relationship for both people. When that doesn't happen, this trickles down to the staff and everyone's affected. It trickles to council and everyone's affected. And because people love to chatter, it will trickle out to the ratepayers, and it'll become a whirlwind of gossip and more negativity spreading. So so if the relationship is healthy and strong, and the communication is open and honest, but we all are good intentions. If you wake up every day with good intentions instead of secret little, my own agenda kind of thing, then you're all working together. And we do need to step back. We all step over a line occasionally, but we need to step back to make sure we're following the rules, following the policies and bylaws and the procedures. But still, that line of communication is vital. Your CAO knows, if you're a new mayor, your CAO knows how you need to conduct yourself, knows what you need to know. And that relationship changes everything and creates a much more productive, positive council. So again, I would love to introduce Mr. George Cuff, and good evening, George.
Good evening, Tammy. Good evening to all of you. I'm speaking from, we have a small apartment in Abbotsford, British Columbia, which is where I flew out to this morning. I'm doing a seminar tomorrow for the city of Abbotsford. One of the few in-person ones that I've been doing lately. Most have been webinars like this. The advantage, of course, of the webinars is that I get to be doing work across Canada without having to leave my home. There's some advantage to me as I age. The disadvantage is that I don't get to see you face to face, and I can't read the whites of your eyes and can't figure out your body language, which often tells me volumes, as you might imagine by this stage in my career. And I'd love to see you and shake hands and meet you, but this is as close as it gets for the moment, at least. And I'm delighted to have the opportunity to present. And as Tammy said, there's a brand new book on the shelf called The Mayor. That's produced by municipalworld.com. And it follows the one that I did previously during the COVID, which was called Tucker Goes to City Hall. And, I would, it's a shameless flogging of books, but if I were you, I would have both. The Tucker Goes to City Hall would be great if you could, if you're financially secure, you could buy a round of those for your grade 6 class or grade 5 class, and show up at the school. And having read a 40 or 50 page book complete with illustrations done by my daughter, they would have a better understanding of local government than they've ever had, either up till now or until much later in life. And it's an easy to read, catchy story about the young boy and his dog walking through the community and bumping into all things municipal. So if that interests you, buy the book. You'll do probably my daughter a favor, and whatever revenue I get from books all of it goes directly to a children's camp in northwestern Romania called Camp Falkenrock. You can probably look it up on your website, or you can go to a website called rootsinromania.com and you can see the whole Camp Falkenrock story, and it's an amazing story. So the person that's helping to lead that camp grew up across the street from us, and I can tell you that he had more mentoring from my wife than from me, but obviously some of it all spills over, and he would give both of us some degree of the credit. Anyway, that takes all of my energies and time with regard to flogging books. The money that we make out of books and videos goes to the camp, so I somewhat feel more comfortable doing so. In any case, this is a huge topic. And so obviously we're not going to cover everything in the time I've been allocated. What I want to do is cover some basic fundamental truths based on my experience over the last 42 years dealing with municipalities large and small. And I want to share with you some basic observations, some principles, and then I want to address some questions which have come up over time that might also be useful to you. So this hopefully will apply to you. If you don't think it does, put a question into the chat box, and Tammy will pick those up at the end of our session, and I'll try to address those before we close off. So feel free to do that, or feel free to write to me at any time. People think I'm joking. They think I'm too busy to respond. I just got a question from Manitou Beach out of Manitoba, or Saskatchewan rather, half an hour ago before I went online. I've already responded to it. If you drop me a note, I try my best to get back to you fairly quickly. And if you want to share it with the rest of your council, so much, I presume that you're going to. So let me plunge in and talk to you about what I've hopefully planning on getting across to all of us today, and hopefully it makes good sense to you and to me. If it doesn't make good sense to me, we're all in trouble, given the fact that I wrote it. The one disadvantage at my age is that I end up plagiarizing myself. So anyway, so this relationship, my question is this unique? Legislation makes very little, if any, comment on this rather unique relationship. It's interesting. You look through legislation, you look through books, and you find very little about the relationship between the mayor and the chief officer. And I'm going to refer to that chief officer as CAO, even though you might have a different title in your community. By the way, I think you ought to call the person the CAO. It's a rose by any other name is still a rose. I think you should move forward with simply designating your chief officer as your chief officer. Let them know that's what you think. Let them know that's what you expect. Let them know that's how they should act. And let them know that if they don't have a proper job description for a CAO, they should drop me a note and I'll send them one, at least a template. Secondly, the mayor comes to the table with a very different skill set and expectations in comparison to a CAO. And I've seen that time and again in every province in Canada, all 3 territories. I've worked in all of them, and there is no distinction, no difference. Mayors get elected. They come to the table with an unbelievable wide variety of backgrounds, from the undertaker in Saskatchewan to the pharmacist in the Lower Mainland to people that are involved in engineering. I remember the only Lord Mayor of Canada was in Niagara on the Lake in Ontario, and the person was a grader operator in real life. So people come to the position of mayor with all kinds of different backgrounds. Could be local business, could be being the lawyer, could be being an accountant, could be having no professional background whatsoever, but a jack of all trades. You come in with a completely different skill set, and you ought to reflect on that. And you ought to reflect on the fact that that's obviously not what got you to the table. And you need to underline that. Your background as a fill in the blank did not get you to become mayor, I'll guarantee you. What got you to become mayor is the fact that you love the community, You're passionate about the community. People think you have some leadership skills compared to other candidates. That's always how you're elected. And they're hopeful that you'll make good use of that leadership skills and your ability to talk to an audience and your ability to communicate and your passion for the community. And they expect that if you're doing that, you're going to be able to be an absolute success. The CAO, on the other hand, comes to the table with a different background. The CAO gets to that level in the organization through experience, through longevity, through training and courses on how to be an administrator, how to be a treasurer, how to be a clerk, all of those kinds of backgrounds, and they grow up into the role over time. The relationship itself is similar, but not the same as a chair of a board to a chief executive officer. And chairs and CEOs, who I've also worked with extensively over the years, have a relationship that is similar in terms of unique. It's similar in terms of it's a one-off. It's similar in terms of it's a senior level relationship. But the one word that defines what you're involved in comparison to that of boards in your community or boards in larger centers is the word politics. Chairs typically are not involved in politics to the extent that you are. You're involved in local politics. You're on display. You're expected to be in demand and so on a day-to-day basis. That's not the role of a chair or a CEO. The fundamental and underlying key to success is respect. And you should jot that down because it will be absolutely the principal principle that you'll take away from this seminar is that if you do not have respect between the chair and between the mayor and the CAO, this is fundamentally flawed and it will eventually end in bad circumstances. You need to have respect. You need to walk in as mayor and say, you know, I don't entirely know what got you to this role as CAO, but I understand there's lots of preparation, lots of time, lots of training, which I don't have. And I respect the fact that you know local government better than I do. And I respect the fact that you're going to be providing myself and our council with good advice. That's what I expect. And I believe that I'm going to respect you because I know that you're going to respect my role as mayor. And the two of us will get along well because we have this fundamental degree of respect for one another. That should be said, it should be underlined, and you should come back to that if you're ever struggling. Because if you're struggling, my guess would be that you're no longer in a position of respect. What are some of the roadblocks right out of the gate? Well, one is you might have had a former councillor. You might as mayor have been a former councillor, and your relationship might have either been poor, or it might have been damaged, or it might have been disrespectful, or you might have thought that the CAO was being too cozy with the outgoing mayor. There's any number of things that happen, but often the case is that a former councillor who becomes mayor doesn't necessarily have the same kind of relationship when they were a councillor to when they become mayor. And so if there's a relationship that existed, it might not have been positive. And if that's the case, that's a hurdle you're going to have to overcome. Secondly, you might be aware of the fact that your local social media has been dumping all over the CAO, and you read it avidly, and you might engage in it avidly. I'm not sure, I hope not, but you might. And you might start to believe all of the drivel that is written, and you might start to believe all of the nonsense, and you might start to believe that somebody with a quote loud voice on social media must have the gospel. And the answer is, of course, they don't, but they can make it sound that way because they're nowhere near the truth. They just simply up the volume. And so you get sucked in by what you're reading on social media, which might represent, by the way, 10% of your population, but I doubt very much if it represents the majority. A third roadblock can be the fact that you've now become mayor. Unfortunately, you're also retired. And of course, given the fact that you're now mayor, you now have an office that you can wander into at any time of the day or night or weekend. And you think it's marvelous because as does your spouse, because they're happy to see the north end of you going south. And they are happy to know that you've now got something to do to take up your time that you've got too much of now that the fact is you're retired. And so you can go in the office and be the mayor, all of which sounds nice. And in fact, you might have run on the fact that I'll be your mayor and I'll be your mayor 24 hours a day. I'll guarantee you're going to be mayor 24 hours a day, whether you've got another job or not. But being in the office in a small community, you might think is a good thing. I would tell you that unless you've got very clear role description for you and the CAO, you've got the making of a disaster. And the disaster is because you'll both think you've got the same job after about the first 2 months. So I would argue that you need to have a clear role description. You need to know what your job is as mayor. And you need to also look around the office and count numbers, i.e. how many people are in the office, and then how many people are in the community. And you ought to spend that proportion of time in the community. And I'll guarantee you that's about 90% of the time should be out of the office. That's where you get votes. That's where you connect with citizens. That's where the issues are. We don't need 2 CAOs trying to manage the office. And that has proven to be a disaster year over year over year. And I should be delighted because I get called in frequently when that's the case. And the mayor gets elected and wanders in and gets a good briefing from, I hope, the CAO and senior management. And then the mayor leaves at the end of the first day and thinks to him or herself, if you do all of that, what do I do? And the answer is, of course, that not enough information is given to a mayor or council on the role of mayor and council, which is what I'd probably try to do. And I have background materials on this. So if you're interested, you drop me a note, I'll send you additional information. But the mayor can be sometimes caught up in, gee, if the CAO does all this stuff, what is it that I'm supposed to be doing? And there can be a sense of either envy or a sense of you're duplicating what I do, or why should you get paid so much and I don't, all of that. And I'll guarantee one that comes up from time to time, and it did in the community that I'm currently at Abbotsford. One of the former CAOs was buddies with the mayor of the day. And I wrote about this in my book called Life in the Trenches. If you want a good read, by the way, that's humorous and tells a good message. There's a whole series of stories that I wrote, all based on episodes of Cuff's consulting life. This guy was buddies with the mayor, knew that the mayor was going to win the election, was off watching the hockey games together, all of that kind of stuff. And in actual fact, on the election night, it was such a sure thing that the CAO was seen going into the house of the incumbent mayor on the election night. And it was seen by, I can't remember, either the incoming mayor or his campaign manager. And of course, that didn't land well when they realized that the CAO was buddies with the mayor. It's not wise. You can be colleagues, you can be professional, but you cannot be buddies or friends with the outgoing mayor. Being perceived that way is not to the health of the current CAO. What's expected? Expected is a welcome phone call on election night. Congratulations, Madam Mayor. Delighted that you're elected. Looking forward to getting together. We can be together tomorrow morning or as early as it's convenient, and I'll be happy to give you a briefing and so on. That should happen. Doesn't always, because CAOs are a bit nervous. Do I do that? Do I leave that alone on election night and call the next day? I'd make a phone call on election night if it were me. You provide what's expected, a first-rate orientation to council, and you obviously cover the role of the mayor. And again, if you don't have much information on that, you drop George Cuff a note and I'll send you information so that you can present it more thoroughly. You provide a broad overview of the municipality. You talk about what are the key challenges facing our community. What are some of the ongoing projects we're involved in that are already out of the gate and that we're funding? And then what are some of the planned projects? Because you'll know that this council will want to give some thought to, are those projects that we want to keep going or that we want to stop or that we want to initiate new ones? So we need to get a broad overview before council makes up its mind about what's going to happen or not in the next few months. What's expected is a commitment to open communication. Mayors in particular don't want to find out that something's going on in the community from a source other than the CAO. The mayor wants to know that the CAO, the minute they've heard of something that they know is significant, politically probably, the CAO will be on the blower, text, email, whatever, to the mayor and say, this has come up, you should be aware. And it might be that the barn door was left open and all the horses have bolted. It might be something that's particularly embarrassing. Doesn't matter, the mayor needs to know immediately, and then the rest of council, almost concurrently. The mayor expects the CAO to support their election agenda, unless, of course, that the mayor is very specific about what the mayor is going to try to accomplish, only to find out that the rest of council was moving in a different direction. So when you're supporting an election agenda, you need to do that with some degree of caution if you're the CAO, until council and the mayor have got together and decided what works on our agenda. Because as all of you, I'm sure, know, it's not the mayor who calls the shots. It's not the mayor whose agenda we're going to work on. It's the agenda of council, and that's legal. Following the mayor's agenda unilaterally is not. You don't have that kind of power or authority. So, for example, I was just called in within the last 3 months to a municipality in Manitoba and asked to be their independent arbitrator on a code of conduct inquiry where the mayor had refused to act on a resolution of council. They were providing funding to community centers, and the mayor, for a number of reasons, said, no, I'm not signing the check. And somebody charged her with an offense under the code of conduct and referred it to me. They both agreed that Cuff should be the one that reviews it. And of course, I probably went overboard, but anyway, 50 pages later, they have their report. And at the end of the day, regardless of how I slice and dice it, the mayor is one of, and the mayor is expected to follow the approved direction of council, regardless of whether or not that follows the direction of the mayor. The CEO, the chief elected official, and the CAO, the chief administrative official, should have regular communication. And so there should be a time set aside by the mayor and the CAO to meet. You can say, oh, well, I'm always in the office. Oh, well, the door is open. Don't believe that nonsense. That never works. It sounds like it's going to, and then it doesn't. And people start, the communication starts unraveling. So set Monday morning at 10 or Friday afternoon at 3:30 and have a 45-minute discussion about what's coming forward on the next week or the next agenda, but have ongoing regular communication in addition to bumping into each other through the week or perhaps being in each other's office during the week. I'm talking about something that's absolutely formalized so that you stick to it. Otherwise, communication starts to splinter and relationships do the same. What's expected is this theory of no surprises. So when I was consulting, I would say to my CAO, I'm going to be at any point, any place in Canada doing consulting. At the same time, I expect to know what's going on in my home community of Spruce Grove. And so regardless of where I'm at, you get a hold of me on a daily basis. If something happens, something doesn't, don't worry about it, but get a hold of me and we'll have that discussion. And I said to him, a guy named Gary Swinham, I said, Gary, the only thing I want to be surprised by when I land at the Edmonton airport coming from, say, the Pearson airport in Toronto, the only thing I want to be surprised by is something that happened in the last 4 hours while I was sitting on the plane. Otherwise, I want to know. If it's significant, I don't want to run into it at the airport or anywhere else. I want to know. So we had that kind of relationship and a very healthy one. And I was just on the phone to him this week. He's retired. He's in Calgary. He's got major health struggles with his wife. And we have an ongoing good relationship. But no surprises was fundamental, as well as respect, as I talked about earlier. This whole idea of a sound relationship being essential is critical to all of you. You cannot be a quality mayor. I'll say this again. You cannot be a quality mayor and have a poor relationship with your chief officer, your clerk treasurer, your CAO. You can't. You can't be doing the kind of job the citizens expect and do it on your own. You can't be the kind of mayor that's leading the community and having the CAO going in an opposite direction or undermining you or not working hand in glove with you as the mayor and council. So where lies the challenges? One is the very nature of the relationship. Because you have this individual who's well-known in the community, is seen to be the community, it's seen to be the leader. Most people know who the mayor is. I mean, I recall talking to a former mayor of Regina who had become a member of parliament and then became a cabinet minister. And he said, you know, George, the most important role I ever had was mayor, and people knew who I was. They could talk to me, they could see me, they could phone me. They thought they knew what the mayor's job was, even if they didn't, they thought they did. He said, when I became an MP and then a minister, he said, my calls went down dramatically. People hadn't got a clue what it was the federal government did in relationship to them in the municipality. The community, the relationship is critical. It's a one-off relationship. It's one born out of relationship between each other on a day-to-day basis. You need to have confidence in the CAO. You need to know that when council makes a decision on Monday night, Tuesday morning, the CAO and the rest of the management group are getting together to say who's doing what to carry out the direction of council. What do we need to change based on that resolution? That's what happens. You know that people are meeting and they're getting on with it because council's made the decision. There should be a challenge can be direct contact between the mayor and one or more department heads or junior staff. If you've got an ongoing relationship being developed between the mayor and one of your senior staff, you got the makings of a disaster, a problem, something that's going to blow up in your faces. So, Madam Mayor, Mr. Mayor, your job is to have a relationship with the CAO, whether you like the person or not, whether you think their style is something you're comfortable with or not. That's your principal relationship administratively. Don't go past the CAO and say, oh, well, I just thought it was easier if I talked to the department head in charge of public works or community services or what have you. But why not go past the department head and start talking to one of the junior staff? We'll get you down to the Zamboni operator in no time. And all of a sudden you'll hear all of this pushback about why is the mayor interfering in the administration of the municipality? And the answer is that's exactly what you'll be doing if you go past the CAO without the CAO's permission. You're undermining confidence in the CAO. There's no question. You need to understand that the code of conduct has clout. And a challenge could be that you sit there, you sign off in the code of conduct, but as in the mayor in Manitoba, you have no intent of abiding by it unless it coincides with how you feel. That's interesting. Why didn't you say that before you signed it? That I'm good with this code as long as it lines up with where I'm at. No, that's not what a code of conduct does. It applies to all of you as a council. Or you have a challenge where the mayor and the CAO begin making decisions that they're not permitted to make. So I did some work in previously, but not that long ago, in Cranbrook in southern British Columbia, a place actually that I worked at when I worked for the Royal Bank way back when. And the mayor and the CAO would go through the community, they'd decide what needs to get done, and the CAO would get on with doing it. The rest of council may or may not be informed, and when they were informed, it was always after the fact. And of course, all of that became undone when they made a decision to call me in and look at council decision-making. It was an unmitigated disaster. And the mayor was used to making decisions because the mayor was a former leading business person in the community and had that kind of clout to make decisions as the CEO of the organization. Well, in this case, the mayor is the political leader and is not the administrative leader of the organization. So what are the benefits of a good mayor-CAO relationship? One of the benefits is the consistency of leadership, that you're both on the same page. You both see what needs to be done. You both had council involved in the discussion. Council's made a decision, passed the motion, and the CAO and the management group or the staff are all undertaking the decision of council. So there's consistency. You're not speaking off different pages or singing off a different hymn book. You're consistent in your leadership. There's evidence of respect for others to observe. People in the community can tell that the mayor and the manager, CAO, clerk, treasurer, call them what you want, are on the same page, and there's respect between both people. You go to a Chamber of Commerce luncheon, And you can tell from the body language that the mayor and the CAO have respect for one another. Not buddy-buddy, not sitting in the same pew at church, not part of the same chess group, not part of whatever, but there is respect. The mayor deals with any internal council issues so that the CAO is recognized as being the person that's going to handle administrative glitches and failures. The CAO is not going to be called on to deal with council issues because those are best dealt with by the mayor. Has it always been the case? No, I was called to one of the largest rural municipalities in Alberta to deal with this very topic. I called it the BlackBerry issue. So if you're interested in reading about it, it's sort of an interesting read where the mayor deferred the council issue, the problem with their councillor, deferred it to the CAO, and the CAO handled it. And of course, it landed badly, ended up getting on the front page of the Edmonton Journal. And they talked about the cuff report into the BlackBerry incident. Anyway, it's never healthy when you've got the CAO dealing with internal council issues. If there's a problem between councillors, I don't care how difficult it is, that's up to the mayor to sit down the two individuals and talk it through. The benefit of the mayor regularly being advised on potential or real public issues and concerns. The mayor's up to date. The mayor's aware of what's happening within a board or committee, for example. The mayor's advised with regard to an ongoing debate or dispute in the downtown business community, or there's something coming up on social media that the mayor should be aware of. The benefit there is considerable. The mayor and the CEO can discuss agenda issues before each meeting. Do I think the mayor should be the one that decides the agenda? No, that's not in the legislation, nor do I think it should be. The mayor, however, should be briefed by the CAO and the clerk with regard to items that are coming up so that the mayor knows what's the intended or hoped for resolution of that issue, so that the mayor can guide the discussion and know when an agenda has been completed or agenda item has been completed. So that discussion, I would argue, should take place 3 or 4 days before a council meeting. And the CAO would be advised of any criticism by members of council. And I would argue that a council should be getting together regularly to talk about their relationship to the CAO, to talk about whether or not there's issues that the CAO should be aware of and advised of. And it's like letting the air out of a balloon gently as opposed to pricking an overfilled balloon and seeing the disaster that happens thereafter. You're far better off making sure that the mayor and the CEO are constantly talking about what are issues that are being perceived by members of council. What are some of the techniques for success? You begin on the right footing. You have early and regular briefings. And if you're not having them now, start them. Start them this coming Monday. Begin on the right footing. Make sure that the CAO is bringing the mayor up to date. Spend 15 minutes, 20 minutes together, have a cup of coffee, and have the CAO have a list of items that they're prepared to brief the mayor on. Again, depending on the size of the community, that might happen more or less frequently. The CAO should be discussing the mayor's priorities with the mayor and giving the mayor some advice on how those priorities can be moved forward. There's nothing more frustrating to watch than a mayor who's articulated certain key priorities during an election campaign and then watches them all dissipate over time because they somehow didn't get onto the council agenda. Now, that's not healthy, I'll guarantee you. The CAO should be explaining the approach to strategic planning, which, by the way, I think is named badly. I think it should be called strategic thinking. That's the part that council is involved in. Council should be expected on a semi-annual or annual basis to come up with the key priorities for the community, because management is the group that's going to be doing the strategic planning. And by the way, if you haven't put your computer on mute, would you please do that, because I can hear some feedback. Both the mayor and the CAO should commit to no games. The CEO will always ensure that the mayor is briefed on significant challenges within the organization. You're not going to hide stuff as the CAO because that'll all leak out and land badly. So again, you don't want to drag the mayor into minor issues of limited significance, but if there's something major going on with regard to department heads, for example, the mayor should be briefed, and both of you should make sure that you're not playing silly games. Has that happened? Absolutely. These things wouldn't be on my list if they hadn't gone badly. You know, so the mayor that was involved romantically, or at least physically, with the head of bylaw enforcement, no, the head of development services, was obviously involved in game playing with that individual, undermining management as a whole, and trying to get the head of development services to favor some of his planned developments. Anyway, this landed badly, as you might imagine. Technique for success is to review and discuss the need for an annual performance review of your chief officer. That process should be reviewed. You should ensure that it's not limited to the mayor and the CAO. That should involve all of council. And if you're not aware of what an ongoing review looks like or performance review looks like, drop me a note and I'll send you a performance appraisal system. A technique is to bring forward key existing policies or topics for review and council approval. What policies are ongoing? What issues are significant? What did the last council think was significant? What new policies were developed by the last council? You know what I find is really interesting? You can have a council get elected on the basis of, we didn't like the decisions of the last council. And they get elected, sit in the chair, and they think everything's changed. The answer is nothing changed. You still got the same policies. You still have the same bylaws. The only thing that changed is the bum in the seat. So what you need to be talking about is, what policies were we upset about? And let's have those brought forward for a review, and then do it thoroughly and without bias, and look at it carefully. That's what should be happening. And that, by the way, will build a relationship between council, the mayor, and the CAO. You should identify colleagues of the mayor in other communities who could act as a mentor, so that the CAO can point out and say, Madam Mayor, Mr. Mayor, you're brand new to the task. Here's a couple of other mayors over time that have really impressed me. They're either still in their role or they just recently retired. Here's somebody that you could reach out to and get some feedback from. I mean, that's always a bit questionable, because the mayor in that other community was obviously faced with other issues and different personalities, and they might be giving you advice that I'm not sure you want to accept. But at least you'd have somebody that you can bounce ideas off of. That's one thing. I'd also identify somebody in your own community that could act in that kind of fashion, that can be either a mentor to you or a sounding board, and that is absolutely high reputation and is not inclined to blab it around the community. So I would try to make sure that the mayor has somebody to talk to. I would make sure that the mayor has access to 2 or 3 of the books that Cuff and others have written, which talk about the role of the mayor. And if nothing else, get a hold of me and I'll send you a paper on the same topic. What are some of the roadblocks? So like the roadblocks, one of them is history. Sort of what's been the history of the council, CAO, mayor relationship in the past? What's gone wrong? What's gone off the tracks? How has the mayor been undermined or thinks they've been undermined? How is the CAO taking on more role than they should? How has the mayor previously abused the CAO or other members of the management group? Why do we have so much turnover in our senior management? Well, part of it's because the mayor comes in and undermines people, talks badly about them at a council meeting or a public session. So history can become a major roadblock to a good relationship. I talked about this earlier, but the whole question of who's the expert seems to come up fairly often. And of course, the answer is, if you're talking administratively, the expert's your CAO or your clerk treasurer. Who's the expert politically? The mayor. That's what got the mayor the role. That's what brought the mayor to the dance. So in terms of the role overlap, the problem is, the question becomes, who's the expert if both the mayor and the CEO are both trying to manage the organization? I have very seldom read anything by anybody. In fact, I'm not sure I ever have a candidate. We're just going through an election in Alberta right now, so I got access to all kinds of this stuff. But I don't recall reading anything that says, elect me and I'll manage City Hall. If I read that, I'd be phoning the person, say, you don't manage City Hall. We've got a CAO or city manager that does that. You provide political input. You provide the will of the people. Another likely roadblock are internal pipelines, where I've had the mayor say to me, oh, well, I got solid information from another source. Oh, I see. You got somebody in the organization who realizes that you're a bit naive and has decided to throw stuff your way and tell you that they've got the access to the gospel. And if only you listen to them, you'll be wise and you'll have all this information at your disposal. And you believe that? Gee, if I were you, I wouldn't be making too many purchases on your own. Internal pipelines exist in every organization. Somebody is around that's all too willing to tell you what's really going on. And the answer is, it isn't. So I'd be really careful about listening to the internal pipeline stories. Social media is another source of great disinformation. So if you're wanting to know all that goes on something that never happened, spend your time on social media, write back and forth. I've read enough of it to know how much of that is largely drivel, and it becomes almost a complete waste of time, other than it can be really entertaining and interesting if you don't have much else on your social calendar. Another likely roadblock or a major administrative blunder or failure. Somebody has made a significant mistake administratively, and that can be a real cause of council undermining the administration or the administration undermining themselves. And sometimes these are not owned up to, which makes it even worse. Intelligent CAOs, competent CAOs immediately step to the plate and say, you know, we blew it. And here's what we're doing to fix it. A roadblock can be who gets the credit. I read newspapers regularly and media regularly, and I find it interesting to see who's being quoted on some major project. So if you looked at our local newspaper in the last week, you'd see that there's a major project being unveiled to the community. And our outgoing mayor is standing there front and center with shovel in hand, talking about this new project that's just being developed and has been approved. So who gets the credit? Well, the guy with the shovel in his hand, the mayor, the current mayor. Is that really what happened? Is that really the person that should get all the credit? Maybe not. First of all, the decision would have been council, not just the mayor. And secondly, management might have been the one that came up with the idea in the first place. But a smart management understands we don't need our name in the newspaper. We don't need our name in media. We don't need to be getting the credit. If this goes well, the politicians get the credit and we do the work behind the scenes. And what's another roadblock, and I talked about this earlier, is the mayor being blindsided on a significant issue. Boy, to the best of your ability, if you're a CAO in the audience or clerk treasurer, make sure that anything that comes up that's of significance, boy, that's in the hands and the eyes of the mayor immediately. This stuff always leaks out. So I would be really careful about not trying to bury it, hide it, whatever. How does the community benefit? The key leadership roles become clear. People understand the mayor versus the CAO. I'd love to believe that that's true. I'd love to believe that that's what's happening in my own community and in yours. It's an ongoing process, folks. I mean, part of my reason for writing this book, Tucker Goes to City Hall, was to explain what does City Hall actually do. And most parents, when their child comes home after their local government class, haven't got a clue what the kid's talking about, couldn't tell the son or daughter what makes sense in terms of what does the mayor do, what does council do, what does the management do, why do they have fees and charges at the local pool or arena, who sets the schedule for volunteer groups, all of that kind of stuff. None of that's clear, and it ought to be. There ought to be articles in your local media on a weekly basis talking about who does what. The community benefits because they understand policy and political issues land with the mayor and councillors, and the administrative issues land with management. And boy, if that could be true in your community, you've made major progress. There would be likelihood of internal council management disputes would be minimized because there would be a much greater respect. You remember that word from my first slide in terms of who does what. New and improved policies could well result, along with community projects are likely to be boosted or improved or undertaken. There would be consistency of messages to neighboring communities. I was on a webinar, not a webinar, but a conference call today I'm about to do some work for the Edmonton Regional Board, which it consists of 13 major municipalities, Edmonton and their surrounding neighbors. What you want there obviously is a consistent message. What are we as a region doing and pushing forward? And there's comfort in hearing that the leadership is largely on the same page. I don't want the mayor to be exactly the same as the CAO and vice versa, but I would like to think that when a statement is made with regard to an upcoming policy, a new project, that management is enthusiastic in supporting what the mayor is saying on behalf of council. And finally, I've talked about and mentioned the books and videos and so on and questions, and I'd be happy to respond to your questions with regard to local government, with regard to this particular webinar. I see that there's, I think, 4 responses in the chat box. Tammy, did you want to see if there's any question there that you'd like to read out? And if not, then I'll talk about some other issues that have come up.
George, I actually shared a link with them on how to buy your books.
Okay.
And where, and then you just shared another one. And I just have the one question, will everyone that's participating at tonight's event receive a copy of the slide decks and a copy of the event recording? So that's, I don't know the answer to that one at all, but
Well, I do. The answer is yes. Copy of this, my presentation should go to everyone.
excellent.
And they'll have a chance to either get back to me or at least have it in their hip pocket with regard to this particular presentation. So yes, the answer is people should have access to it because it's frustrating otherwise. You're not going to remember everything that I just covered.
So does anyone have other questions? Oh, here we go. Thanks for sharing the presentation. I face a challenge where a councillor undermines the CAO. What's a mayor's role to protect a CAO from councillors?
Yeah, and does it happen? The answer is yes, and it happens far more frequently than most of us would like to see. The mayor's job is, in my view, is to take aside the councillor in question at the end of a meeting or at some separate time. Call the person, say, look, Charlie, it'd be great if we could meet for a coffee. I want to chat with you about something that happened at council meeting or whatever, and then talk about it and say, you know, we can't afford for this to be happening. We can't afford for this kind of relationship to be going on. If you've got concerns about our manager, feel free to voice them to me as the mayor. I'll take it up with the manager. That's the proper way to do this. As a councillor, you have far too much clout, far too much power over the role of the CAO, clerk treasurer, and boy, that's a very delicate balance to be maintained. So I would argue that the mayor obviously doesn't get paid enough to do this, but the mayor's role includes policing their own council. And that comes back to my story about my report on what we call BlackBerry, because that was the center focus of that particular issue, but it dealt with who does what. And if you've got the manager policing councillors, you've got the wrong role entirely. That's got to be the mayor's role. And I know it's difficult, and I know you're trying to play nice with everybody and keep their respect. But at some point, you need to sit down and say, you know, this is not on. This is not how we treat our management. We're going to lose good people.
Is there anyone else that have any questions for Mr. Cuff?
So one of the questions that I have had, I'll come to you, Marie Nicole, in just a moment, but one of the questions that I've had posed to me is I've outlined a whole bunch of roles that the mayor has in this book. What do I see as the most significant role? It's a really good question because I outlined a whole series of them that he embodied in what the mayor is. You know, one of the most significant roles that a mayor is going to have is to represent the community. You need to be able to speak to issues on behalf of the community. You have to be able to set aside your own personal bias and say, here's what I think is in the best interest of all of us. We've had a really good discussion on council. We've come to a decision as a council, and this is what I think is in the best interest of all of us. And hopefully what you're saying is consistent with what council has decided, or you're going to look like a house divided. So to me, if you're able to represent what's best to the community and what's best from the community to council, you're doing your role as a leader of the community. And I think, Tammy, we've got a question from Marie Nicole. Or sorry, I guess that's the mayor. That's Nicole Fortier. I can't see. That's the problem, Nicole. Madam Mayor, it's over to you.
Thank you, George. I really appreciate this workshop. It's been very helpful. There are some good tips there. My concern is what do you do when one of the employee doesn't respect the CAO's role, or doesn't, well, I'll use the same word as Bilsma, undermines the CAO.
Yeah.
I know it's not our job, not at all.
Yeah, so I think, one of the things to be done is, and you can make a note of this, is at the start of a term, as the mayor, Nicole, you would call everyone in and say, thanks for your congratulations. We've got a new council. We're looking forward to working on our best effort on behalf of the community. I just want to make sure that there are certain basic fundamentals that we all understand. I don't plan to be lobbied by any one of you individually, whether it's at the grocery store, on Main Street, in my office, at my home, or in this office. We are committed to our CAO until we decide otherwise, but at the moment we are obviously committed to our CAO, and we plan to stay that way. And I plan to have a good relationship. So if you've got a concern and you're not sure where to take it, all you need to do is one fundamental principle I was taught, and that's to look up. And when you look up in an org chart, you see who you report to. And the person you report to, that's who you take up your issue with. And eventually that gets to the desk of the CAO. And if the CAO is intelligent, as I think they are, they'll also look up and they'll realize, gee, I report to council and the mayor. If I've got a concern, that's who I take it up with. This process works. It's called the 1-over principle, and it works. Where you screw it up, Madam Mayor, is where you get yourself between lines of authority, where you get yourself to become the champion of the underdog, where you become the person that somewhere you're talking to people halfway down the organization. It becomes my Zamboni driver incident, which never goes well, it never lands well, it never ends well. Regardless of what you think you're doing, you're undermining. And if you don't have trust in your CAO, pull the plug. Convince a majority of council and pull the plug on the CAO. It's as simple. It's costly, but that's as simple as that. You got to have the community is going to say, why did you do it? And you got to come up with a really good answer. Because you couldn't get the gospel out of the CAO, you had to go down to the Zamboni driver. It's, to me, it's a classic.
But it's not the town. It's an employee.
Right.
Employee.
So you say to the
up to the councillors, because he doesn't have he doesn't respect the CEO.
Right, and I'm saying the same principle applies. So you need to be able to say to your colleagues on council, our job is to have our liaison with the CAO. And if anybody else is trying to get our ear, that's probably somebody that's trying to undermine the decision-making. They obviously can't get it through the next level in the organization. So they're going to do an end run and come to us. We're foolish if we accept that. We're going to completely undermine the organization.
Yes.
And that's exactly what has happened time and time again. And it's disastrous and it's expensive.
And I have to tell you, thank you. I have to tell you that at since the beginning of the pandemic, it has been worse. But now
Yeah.
everything is going very well with council. Finally, everybody understands their role, and it's going so well. In fact, at our last council meeting, one of the councillor, before he left, he said, it's unbelievable how things have changed here. And he said it's very good, and we can see the dynamic is so
Yeah.
much different. So I was very happy about that. But finally, everybody knows their role now, like on council. But we still have, like I said to the CAO, I said, I can't do anything about your employee. I can do something about counselors. I can talk to counselors, and but finally it's going very well. But it's still a problem with one of the employee.
Yeah.
But okay, very good. Thank you.
And you need to have this discussion, Nicole, with your CAO without identifying the employee, although they probably know. I would just leave the name out of it. And I would say this has to be you straightening it out internally as the CAO, and I'll be doing the same thing with my council. I'm not going to be straightening it out administratively other than our first meeting of the year, when I'm going to say we as a council are committed to the structure and we're committed to the principle of non-interference.
That's exactly what I have done with the administrator, and yes, but
You're
we
on
still
the right, yeah,
we
you're
still
on the
have-
right track. You're on the right track. Keep doing it.
very good. Thank you.
Another question, George, but all I see is council's iPad, so. Unmute.
Okay, that's me.
There you
Yes,
go.
that's me. It's Madeline Tremblay. I have a question regarding also the relationship between the CAO and the mayor. It is when I am informed from the CAO, I do get the look from some of my counselors is it seems that they have a tendency to judge or to look at me like I'm in cahoot with my CAO.
Right.
So I really don't feel right, because it is normal that I get informed first.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's a lacking of myself but that happens during a meeting.
So, Madam Mayor, what you should do is take this on as a key topic, because I'll guarantee you that it is. And you ought to sit down with your council colleagues by yourselves, and you should say to them, you know, I read all the stuff I can get my hands on, including this guy by the name of Cuff that writes about this extensively. And his principle is that I, as the mayor and the CAO, have a unique relationship. We have to be working hand in glove. And to do that, I have to be close to the CAO and make sure we have ongoing conversations. What I will assure you is that we're not buddies. I'm not trying to become a buddy, which is probably one of the most overworked words in the English language. We're not buddies. We're not best friends. We don't sit in the same pew. We don't belong to the same chess club. I'm going to be doing my absolute best to keep what's called the Chinese wall around the relationship, because it is a significant relationship. On the other hand, I don't manage the person. I liaise with the person. Council is who that person reports to. They don't report to me as the mayor. I happen to get briefed first because I'm the mayor, and there's a level of respect for the role of the mayor. But I am not the decision maker, nor do I pay the person's salary. That ought to be made clear to your council, and I would do that as a one-off. I would do that specifically, as I would with Mayor Nicole. I would do the same thing. I would talk to this issue specifically, because otherwise it lingers, and it doesn't get better by lingering. It's like bad food left out on the counter. This simply just increases its smell. So I would make sure that you address the issue and say, I'm going to do my best to work with this CAO. I'm going to do my best to be your conduit as the mayor of this council. That I'm going to make sure that all of you as council know everything I know of any significance. and you will know it as quickly as we can get it out to you. Don't sit on information. Don't
Okay.
play silly games. Don't pretend it's you and the CAO against the world, because it'll become a disaster for both of you.
Okay, thank you.
I have another question in the chat. Where I work, there is no CAO, only a clerk treasurer. Other managers report to council as a whole. Is there a risk to council in managing this way?
You know, if you sent me a note, Tammy, I could probably take one more crack at this topic and you could send it out to everybody. But it is one of the best known principles in both government and private sector across North America, and that's that the best organizations are managed by one authority. The last thing you want to have is diffuse authority, where you have a number of people reporting to the council, like Johnny in the box, and you folks can manage all of them individually, which absolutely destroys the role of council, because you'll start to think you're now managers. Oh, we get to manage public works. There's a favorite one. That's 60% of the average budget. We get to manage the clerk's office. We get to manage the treasurer. So, gee, that's wonderful. Show me your brochure that says, elect me and I'll manage public works. Show me the brochure that says, based on my unbelievable skill set, I'll be the manager of the recreation department. No, you've already got one of those. You've got a clerk treasurer. My point right at the outset. If people think that I gloss this over or that I don't understand the roles and so on, all due respect to the Association of Clerks and Treasurers, you need CAOs. You need a CAO that's the manager, the person that you have faith and trust in. I can guarantee you, if you've got more than one reporting to you as a council, you've got the makings, not always, but you've got the makings of a disaster, because it's not, there's no role clarity. It's management playing games behind your back. That's everybody trying to get their share of the budget approved by council. My issue is more important than your issue. All of that kind of stuff. It's gone on and on and on since I started in this business 42 years ago. I wrote about this. This is still going on in small community. Oh, we can't afford a CAO. Just change the title. Decide which one's the most logical one to be CAO, or have them all apply for the job and add on $1,000. I don't care. Anyway, somebody said I'm a bit outspoken on the topic, but so be it.
Not at all. I have a question from Mayor Ken Lamming.
Mr.
Yes.
Mayor.
Good night. Good job. I enjoyed the first one. I enjoy this one. The question I have a counselor that seems to make deals with the CEO or not. So what should I do about a counselor that does that?
Well, I would sit down with the CAO and say, you know, if you're enjoying your job at the municipality, you'll of course remember that you report to all of council, with me being the primary conduit. And you'll know that your job is paid for by the municipality. And so you only have one employer. It's called the mayor and council. And I'd hate to think that you thought, Mr. CAO or Madam CAO, that one councillor somehow was going to be the one calling the shots. The answer is they're not. And I'm going to make this absolutely uncomfortable for that councillor. And I make it absolutely uncomfortable for you until it stops. So this will be on the next agenda, and I will be pointing out that all of us speak with one voice. This is how the system is set up. This is not new. And that one voice will be spoken of as a council through me as the mayor. That doesn't stop you from having chats here and there. It doesn't stop you from bumping into each other in the grocery store or wherever else, on the ball field or the hockey rink. But it does mean that if we're talking things with regard to the person's business as a manager, that comes from council as a whole, as voiced by council resolutions, and as communicated by me as the mayor. Have I made it clear enough? Is anybody in any difficulty of understanding? And if, Mr. Mayor, you're not sure that people get that point, drop me a note and I'll make sure I've written out something that you could share with all of your council.
You can, I wouldn't mind a note so I could share it.
Okay, you drop me the note. You've got my email address on this screen.
Yeah, I probably could get it anyway. Well, I thank you because, so one more thing. So counselors can go in the office, sit down and
Yep.
talk.
Absolutely.
They can do
Yeah,
that.
you can say to council, we need to be cognizant of how much time we're taking of our CAO. But there's nothing to stop any one of you from popping by the office and stopping in the CAO's office, not somebody else's, by the way, stopping in the CAO's office and saying, Charlie or Mary, you got a minute? And you can talk to something for a few minutes. Just realize that there's 5 of us or 7 of us or whatever, and don't dominate their time. Otherwise, you'll upset the rest of us. And then we'll start to believe that you've developed a special relationship which shouldn't exist. So let's all of us be fair. Let's all of us be cognizant. If you're going to come to the office, preferably phone in advance and preferably make it a one-off where you're saying, well, Mr. CAO or Madam CAO, here's what I heard. Here's the issue I want you to be aware of. Thanks very much, and you're on. Don't expect to get an answer because you just gave them the problem. So I'd hate to think you're going to get an answer.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome entirely.
Anyone else?
This relationship works if you have respect for your role and if you have an understanding of what those obligations entail. And quite frankly, for as long as we've had local governments, we have precious little information on the topic. That was the initial impetus for me trying to write this book. It cost you $30 and you'll have a good book for your library. And you'll have made a donation to the children's camp, whether you wanted to or not. Or you can drop me a note if you can't afford the $30 and I'll send you a paper on the topic. But this is it's a critical role, and your community will rise or fall based on how well you lead. Just think about that. This is significant. Community makes progress based on its leadership. And Mary Nicole had a question.
Yes, I see one more. Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you, George. Just to add on Mayor Ken Lamming there, you know, you said like some councillors will go and chat with the CEO or the administrator, whatever you call that person, and with respect there. Sometimes I know in my municipality it happened before I was mayor, and then it when I was elected as mayor, it happened again after that councillors would go see the CEO, and they would give them a list, or they would complain about things that they would like to have more information on, like let's say like projects that are going on, and they and what do you do? It doesn't happen anymore. I'm very grateful about that, but it did happen. So yes, what do you say?
Yeah, in my mind, Madam Mayor, you put in place a strategy that says we're going to make sure that all of us are briefed as equally as possible. I realize that I get briefed, you know, minutes before the rest of you because I'm the mayor and because that's respectful. But I make sure that the administrator knows that anything that comes to me, unless it's of a personal nature, is going to go to all members of council as quickly as possible. That's one statement and one principle. I'd also make sure, and you can drop me a note on that in terms of principles of communication or whatever. I would also say that all of us are wise to know that this person's got a lot of things on their platter in terms of their work that they expect to get done today. And they don't necessarily need to have it complicated by you asking questions as though you were making a demand. So you got to be really careful that even though you think you're framing it as a question, you make sure that you're not leaving it with the person to start writing up a new report. The only way we get a new report is by council making the motion, not by you making the suggestion. So because that's been done and people get really clever and how they manipulate the time of the CAO by saying, well, I just asked a question and I wondered whether or not Charlie could get back to all of us with the answer, because I'm sure it applies to all of us. Well, of course, that completely takes Charlie off their own agenda for the day. And now they're going to start writing a report based on what? See, it didn't come from council, it came from a councillor. You just say to your colleagues, if you want the administration to be researching and writing a report, that has to be a motion of council. You don't have that clout individually. We operate as a body. I'm the leader of that body, but we operate as a body. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm looking for, I don't see it. There's, Peggy, could you read it out, please, your question? Or the question we received? I'm not finding it.
Sure, Tam, I can do that. We've had a couple of others come in since then, so I will go back and look at it. So the question is, George, we have a situation where a member of council has been found to have contravened the code of conduct in a very serious way, and now has published a newsletter and sent it to all of the community where they have disrespected the process. And just give me a second while I scroll down here. Where they have disrespected the process council has established. How would you deal with it?
Yeah, that's troubling. I would make sure as mayor that I put a note on the website and try to go and also through social media generally. And I would say, I just want to alert all of our residents that we have certain processes that we follow as a council. I'd also like you all to know that we all signed on and agreed to these processes that we knew were in the best interests of the municipality. And so that really grieves me if I find out that one of my colleagues, in quotation marks, has decided to go against the process and to take matters into their own hands. This is a violation of our code of conduct and will be referred over to our, and whatever your investigative process is. In the case of the community in Manitoba, they referred it to me to look into, and I wrote a report on their behalf. But you ask for it to be reviewed and researched, and somebody can make a comment on it. I wouldn't allow your counselor to do that and get away with it as though there were no repercussions, because all that does is it starts to slide into other major issues. And so I would make sure that you've tackled that issue before it starts to become a harbinger of other issues to follow it. To me, that's critical. So yeah, I would make sure that the public is made aware of your code of conduct and what it says in that instance. And I would be saying to the counselor, you know, you've just violated the trust of all of us. You signed on to the code of conduct when you got on council, and now you feel comfortable violating your own signature. Anyway, I find that really reprehensible, to be quite candid.
I have another question. I have another question here, Mr. Cuff. Where'd it go? Oh, here it is. It's quite interesting. What do you do with a mayor who leads with a very heavy hand? He takes each member of council into his office prior to a council meeting to try to persuade them how to vote.
Again, you're not going to find that in any book I've ever written or any article I've ever written. Have I found it before? I have. I have mayors that thought they got elected as dictators. They walk around with a ball cap on with the letters GPB. I don't know how that translates to French, but it's Grand Poobah, as though somehow that they had been elevated to the throne and that they were now capable of making decisions for all and sundry. The mayor, in doing that, is in my mind violating their office of mayor by trying to exercise their clout and authority over individual members of council individually. There's nothing that stops the mayor from sending a note in advance to all of council to say, you know, I'm concerned about this issue. I think it's significant. I think we need to have a really good discussion on it. And why don't we call a special council meeting to discuss it, or a committee of the whole meeting to discuss this issue, and we can thrash it out properly rather than having it rushed through. So I'm not saying that the mayor shouldn't take a hand in it, but the mayor who would bring councillors in one by one and lean on them individually, using their clout as mayor, is really going past the post.
So for everyone attending, I would like you to send an email that you attended to support at letter E, number 4, letter M at solutions, and that will guarantee your name in the draw for one of the 5 free books, The Mayor. If there's nothing else, I just want to thank you, George, very much. Every time you speak, I learn something new, and it's enlightening and it's interesting, and we're very grateful for your contribution.
Thanks very much, Tammy and Peggy, and to all of you. You know, this is not an easy job. I don't ever want to make it sound like it is. It's not one that I didn't struggle with from time to time, because I had my own challenges and pressures. I happened to be a student of human behavior, so I watched what was happening both to myself and others. I tried to make sure that I knew when to hold them and when to fold them, as the late sage Kenny Rogers once sang about. So I think, you know, all of us have a learning process, and we don't always get it right out of the gate. And we sometimes think as we go home at the end of a council meeting, if we're doing it in person, we think, why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I handle that a different way? Don't beat up on yourself. Just decide you're going to be the best you can be on a meeting by meeting basis. And just know that you're continually improving. I mean, I'm still learning governance, and I've been doing this for over 40 years. You know, I'm still hearing new situations, still trying to deal with problems that arise. This is not simple. And when I talked about respect at the outset, the underlining all of this is whether or not I respect myself and my role that I got elected into, and whether or not I respect the people that are hired to manage. This is fundamental. And when you're doing a performance review, there's one basic question to be asked. And regardless of everything else you cover, the basic question to be asked to yourself and your colleagues is, do we have confidence and trust in our administrator, in our CAO? That's absolutely underlines everything else. If you don't have faith and trust, the relationship is gone, broken. So you work on that. You work on building your relationship to the individual, and you make sure that nobody plays silly games, because that's going to undermine good relationship. Anyway, my commendation to all of you for serving Canadian public. My commendation for taking on the role of a leader. It's not easy, and we appreciate you. I appreciate the mayor in my own community. We're going to go to a new mayor come Monday night. And I appreciate the fact we've got candidates, and I appreciate that we've got people that are confident and willing to run. And they know that they can call me, ironically, for free advice, because I don't consult in my own community. I never have and never will, but at least I'm available for a cheap lunch. Anyway, God bless all of you, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, George. You've gotten a number of wonderful thank yous off to the side here. So
Thank you very
take good
much.
care.
Thanks,
Good luck
Tammy.
tomorrow. Thank you.
Send me the note. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone. We'll see you soon.